It's a near completely dark room, devoid of anything that could tell us where this is. The only light is coming from what we can presume is a spotlight near the top of the room. And the only thing that light is illuminating is a lone sword, tip firmly planted in the ground. A close-up of the blade notes that it's inscribed with the words "Nothing ventured, nothing gained." The handle looks worn, as if to say that this sword has been used and used well. The blade, however, has no nicks or scrapes, and looks just as sharp as the day it was forged. As the camera focuses on the sword, it catches the glimpse of a hand brushing across the pommel. The camera zooms out as the man that hand belongs to comes into view, and to anybody in the FWA, it is most certainly a surprising man. Cyrus Truth. The time is coming, and coming soon. The former CWA World Champion, the man who reigned as World Champion in the Cleat Wrestling Alliance for more days than anyone, looks almost amused at the sight of the sword sticking in the ground. Despite Cyrus's choice of apparel, namely his heavy hooded trench coat, he looks to be in fighting shape. One might even say he's in better shape than he was towards the end of his second CWA World title reign, which makes sense, since Cyrus's sabbatical was purely to recover and rejuvenate his ravaged body. Not just from the sneak attack by the devious face-painted mystic Shade, but arguably from having carried a lot of what CWA was and is for 4 years straight. But what is Cyrus doing now? And more importantly, what does this have to do with the FWA? Hello and welcome to the Untitled FWA podcast, episode number 17. That's professionalism there, remembering exactly what episode it is. From your premium podcast host, Supplying Snake here. Accept no imitations, even if they're masquerading under the Untitled FWA podcast banner. Hot off the heels of TGO's episode with Sully a couple of weeks ago, I'm joined by another one of the FWA's and Gleek EFED and in general, I guess, is longest tenured participants. I'm talking about a man who is a 2-time CWA World Champion, a 4-time FWA World Champion, an FWA North American Champion, a 2-time Carnal Contendership winner, and in a stat that I don't think is brought up very often, but I think is true as of a couple of weeks ago, the man who's main evented more back-in businesses than anyone else in FWA history. I'm talking, of course, about Cyrus Truth. Welcome to the podcast, Cyrus.
Hello. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, it's. I was just saying, it's good to finally hear from you after all of these years reading your writing and stuff. It's it's obviously novel to hear people for the first time on these things.
Yeah, glad to be here.
How long has it been since you first joined the WC EFED in kind of sphere? I think it's 2011 is what I've got here in my notes as when the sign up was posted. Does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I mean, I joined WC in 2011, and I specifically joined WC for the EFED. I had been participating in feds on and off before then for like 4 or 5 years, something like that. I know I got into it in college. Do you remember the old when WWE had their old Fan Nation forums?
Yes. I vaguely remember. I was never a member of them, but I remember that they existed. Yes.
That's where I got my start. Was with a EFED there. Met a group of individuals from there that kind of led me to some other forums. Tig is one of probably the oldest friend I have that I've EFEDed with for the longest time, and he and I used to run in certain circles until we both ended up on the WC forums.
Okay. So you and Tig were together on the WWF forum, WWE forums.
Well, I think I met Tig after I had left those forums because WWE only had those live for like a couple of years before they were like, this is too expensive for us to manage, and then we're just going to shut these down. So you all go have fun.
Okay, yeah. Well, so I can empathize with that because I was never on the WWE forums, but at the same time I was on the TNA forums at roughly the same time, I guess maybe a little bit before 2005, 2006, and exactly the same.
That must have been that must have been a dumpster fire.
Yeah, well, so it was generally, but the EFED was quite what it was quite good because they had it was like, so the main roster stuff was behind like a, just like the staff room would be, behind like a, you couldn't see it if you were just a regular member. And they had like I remember they had like it wasn't quite developmental, but it was like, it's called the Asylum, and you just had like one-on-one matches that you'd arrange with people, and like a mod would judge it. And you had to do like particularly well in, like, we had to, show that you weren't an idiot in there, I guess, to get onto like the main roster. So it was like our own like hidden part of the forums. But yeah, it was interesting. Can you remember what your first character was back on those WWF forums, WWE
What are you
forums?
talking about? A first character? I've only ever played one character until I played
Oh
Conchu.
wow. Okay, so it's always been Cyrus for, as you say, 16, 17 years now.
Yeah. Now, to be fair, Cyrus wasn't known as Cyrus Truth back then. It was Cyrus Black.
Okay.
But yeah, I have been basically playing the same character ever since I started e-fetting.
Wow. Okay. And so in your first e-feds, were they similar to FWA and CWA in terms of like your promo and then the mods choose a winner, or how did they work, your first experience?
There wasn't like a formal grading system in place. It was more like a play by post sort of thing. So, you posted in the threads, you could basically start a feud with pretty much anybody you wanted. There wasn't really much of a structure. It was the wild fucking west. But but then whoever was basically the head honcho of the thread, the one who started the EFED, would basically, get the shows together, get some people to help them out with writing some of the matches, and just kind of determine who would win based on activity, what kind of work they were putting into that particular the Fed at the time, and so forth and so forth and so on.
Okay, so it's just sort of like a less formalized version, I guess, of what the FWA is now. Like
Yeah, no grading system, no nothing. It was just like, okay, well, I want to see this guy be the world champion because the promos that he's posting in the thread are pretty good, or I like him, or my character gets to be the world champion because fuck it, why not?
Yeah, why not? Yeah, well,
Again, it all depends on who is running the Fed.
that doesn't sound too dissimilar to the FWA now, actually. There you go.
Hashtag truth was robbed.
Well, we'll get to that in part 3, I think. But I think there's enough truth robbing planned for this first section. So pre CWA then, which Fed did you meet Tig in? I think this has been mentioned before in the Discord, but where did
it would have been either 3X. It would have been either 3XW or EFNW. I'm trying to remember which one exactly it was. It's been, or it might have been ECCW. That might have been where I first met Tig.
Okay, so you were running the Cyrus.
It would have been one of those 3 Feds. It would have those 3 Feds were probably my primary quote unquote home Feds when when WWE Fan Nation got shut down, and basically we all scattered to the 4 corners of the internet.
Yeah. Okay. So you were running the Cyrus Truth, Cyrus Black character. Was Tig running with Toner when you first met him, or was he a variety of other characters?
Toner, I believe, was something Toner was a more recent character of Tig's. I believe the character that I remember Tig running was his Twista XL character.
Okay,
that was the one that he was running.
Yeah. Okay, I remember. Okay. So in these early kind of incarnations of Cyrus, so you say it's always essentially been the same character. To what extent were the similarities there with what you're doing with him now? Like, for instance, was the World of Shadows still part of his kind of backstory, or was that built along the way? How did that come about specifically?
So, my personal favorite wrestling character, regardless of the man running it and whatnot, I was an Undertaker mark, and I thought that sort of character, that sort of dark, sort of imposing individual, that was just kind of more that force of nature, that icon, was an interesting take. Now, obviously, I wasn't going to go full, zombie mortician, through multiple different variants, but as far as the World of Shadows go, it's always been there, but it was something that was always just kind of implied in the background. It was something that was always there's more to Cyrus than what you see whenever he's walking down to the ring and dropping people on their heads. The World of Shadows really only became more or less fleshed out in FWA, and I do have to thank franchise Eli Black's handler for kind of helping out with that, because a lot of that sort of backstory, that sort of fleshing out of exactly who and what Cyrus is, was thanks to that particular feud.
Okay, that's interesting, because I was going to bring up that in the early FWA promos, it's already there and kind of established and kind of mentioned, but not really, dove into too much. And I was going to ask if that was something that had been developed earlier, but it's interesting that it was something that was developed mainly later with franchise.
Yeah, it's like, again, it was always something that was implied, that there was always something more, but it was never really expounded upon, and I never really got a chance to kind of dig my teeth into it until the feud with Eli Black.
Okay. So what talk me through an early Cyrus promo then, like, so what could I expect from a Cyrus promo if I was reading even before CWA back in let's say 2007 or 2006?
It was mostly just this it was mostly just sort of kind of heavy sort of gravitas, the sort of, I have come to do something, or you have done something wrong that I need to correct, or you have something that I want.
Okay.
And I am going to hurt you in order to get it. I am going to show you what it is to be afraid to lose something. That sort of, like, if you take a look at some of my earlier CWA promos, it kind of get that sort of feel, that sort of, Cyrus isn't trying to disrespect individuals as wrestlers. It's not what he does. But his whole thing, and this is evident even with my early promos, as my previous promos, is that the character does not have the patience for people putting on this sort of facade of something that they're not. Like, I want to see exactly what you are when we strip away all of the bullshit.
Okay. And that's something that's obviously stayed quite constant with Cyrus throughout to now. So
now obviously my ability with dialogue and whatnot was not there when I first started out. Is like, I'm here, you're not who you say you are. I'm just going to take everything away from you because I can.
Okay. Now, you mentioned there, you said in passing, if you read some of my early CWA promos, which unfortunately, obviously, we can't do now. Do you still have any of those old promos? Is there any that you've kind of kept, or have they all kind of disappeared over time?
I mean, they've all kind of disappeared because, it's there. I didn't think to say that because I didn't really consider that the possibility of the website going down. But that's the thing, and I'm again not mad. It's what it is. But I mean, I do remember some of my promos during that time. Mostly the earlier stuff. Like, I remember very vividly. The promo that I had cut against Chubby Carlos when I faced him at 5 Star Attraction for the title. I remember that one pretty well.
Okay, talk us through that promo if that's a distinctive one to you. Why is that memorable?
So, this was Truth's first reign with the FWA World Title. This was also the year where, there was two different sides of CWA when I first started in 2011. There was the main CWA branch with Adrenaline Rush and that. But then there was also the high voltage show that was Pride and Honor Wrestling. Pride and Honor Wrestling was basically just an offshoot of CWA. I don't remember the specifics on why there was a split, but it was a mistake because there wasn't enough roster to support it.
Yeah.
It was rough. So Pride and Honor kind of got folded back into CWA. A good chunk of the wrestlers from Pride and Honor got over there, and I basically ended up, because I was one of the more prominent performers during that time, that I ended up getting a title shot for the CWA World Title and ended up getting it.
Okay, is this your
the feud with
is this your
Chikara?
first reign? Sorry, in 2012, 134 days. Is this the?
That
Yeah.
would be, yes, the
Okay.
first reign.
Sorry, go on. Sorry for interrupting.
That's fine. So I fended. I had beaten the Ultimate Pain for the title. I'm trying to remember if there was anybody else that I beat during that time. I'm pretty sure there was, but
Yeah,
hell,
it's
I can't remember.
134-day reign, so you'd assume there was a couple of defenses in there, but unfortunately lost to the other.
Yeah, but the main event feud was against Chubby
Yeah.
Carlos when it was AON's character. I remember that the feud was built around, Chubby Carlos is this, kind of this big kid. He was the guy that, was happy to be there, that was, I don't want to say a comedy act, but he was definitely, if I had to put it into a description, it would be basically if Hurley from Lost was a part of the New Day.
Okay.
That was what his character was.
Okay. So can you remember? So your promo specifically against him for 5-star attraction. Why does that one stick out to you? Why is it a memorable feud or promo or match?
Well, one I lost, but the feud itself was Cyrus and AON, to the man's credit, bought into this. Was the idea that you have earned this title shot, but earning the title shot and being worthy of being the champion are two different things. And for me, for my character, the idea was it was based off of the Lucifer's Humbling River song is what I based it off of. So there's Cyrus that's approaching this river, and he's like, I'm here to see if you are able to give me the fight that I am looking for, to prove to me that that you're not only going to take this seriously, but you are going to fight as if your life depends on it, because if you don't, then it certainly will. But for me, it was an opportunity for me to see, how do I get to the next part where I prove that I am the guy to lead this next generation of CWA. Because up until that point, most of the main event talent, like the Ultimate Pain, Roberto Superstar, Mr. Showtime, Mr. Willis, if they hadn't left, they were less than they weren't in the same position that they were at the time, which has kind of been a recurring theme of Cyrus's, now that I think about it, but we'll get to that later. But yeah, it was a very somber sort of promo that basically was like, we are at a crossroads, and I want to see if it's going to be you or if it's going to be me that's going to get us across to the next stage of this particular journey.
Okay. Interesting. You mentioned early in that the idea of Carlos not being ready to be champion, or he's earned the title shot, but he hasn't necessarily shown that he's a champion yet. That theme is definitely something that's central across Cyrus for many years as well. I've thought that as I was reading through some of his promos against Bell and against Kaizen, back in the early FWA days, and then even later on, with the stuff against Peacock and also against Michelle. There's the idea of what it takes to be a champion is something that's quite central. Even back then in CWA, it seems.
Yeah, and that's kind of been one of the things that Cyrus has always been adamant about. It's that any idiot can win a title. And, case in point, the last several years. Now, don't get me wrong, the level of work that's going on in FWA is so much higher than in years past and in most of the feds that I've been with. But we've also had like a dozen world title reigns over the course of 2 years.
Yeah.
And like how many successful defenses?
Not many. So
But in character, for Cyrus's point, there is a major difference between a title holder and a champion. A title holder is somebody who has the title, who can call themselves champion. But an actual champion is an ideal. It is, what are you representing, and why should people care about you and follow
what does
you?
Cyrus represent, and why should people care about him and follow him?
Cyrus, for all of his many flaws, he is a prideful, he is arrogant, and oftentimes he is very dismissive, but he is a man guided by principle. I think there was a discussion during on the Discord where people were trying to fill out alignments and whatnot, and Cyrus was definitely more on the. I don't know if he ended up being in lawful good or lawful neutral, but it's very appropriate because Cyrus, when he fights, he is not a kind individual. He will batter somebody to the point where it gets uncomfortable. But he will not take a shortcut in order to get there. He will not cheat somebody out of a victory. If you beat Cyrus, you will have earned it. Unless you decide to do something unpleasant, in which case then God help you.
Okay, is that what the long and winding road is? If you've if you beat Cyrus, you've earned it. Walking the road.
Right. I mean, that's the whole premise behind that particular philosophy of Cyrus, is that if you really want to get to the prize at the end of the road, getting there by a shortcut doesn't get you anywhere. It just gets you lost within the trees, basically.
Yeah, nice, very nice. So, well, before we get into the FWA period, whilst you're in CWA, you mentioned Chubby Carlos, but before we do move on, obviously it's a long period of Cyrus's career, like 5-6 years. He was at the stage of his entry into FWA the man who'd held the FWA championship for the longest, but I think that might have been eclipsed by Snowman Tashi now, but I'm not sure. But something that does stick out is that other than the North American title very recently, Truth never held any other titles in the CWA, I don't think. And all the
there was a couple of reigns actually, but this was before the whole PNH CWA merger. Truth was a Pride and Honor International champion, and Truth also held because CWA had their own sort of Mexican sister show, AMLL television championship. Technically, Truth is still the AMLL television champion because we never bothered to take it. We never bothered to try to get it off of him. But yeah. But as far as I mean, definitely my career is more associated with the world title.
Was this a deliberate choice, or just how things shook out, or is Cyrus all about the big prize?
It wasn't ever about the big prize for Cyrus. Obviously, I mean, that's the prize. If you have that and you hold that and you defend that, then it definitely is a bigger boon to you. But the truth of the matter is as I mentioned before, when Pride and Honor closed down and everything was merged over to CWA and Adrenaline Rush became the show, I was really the only the highest kind of on the hierarchy from the Pride and Honor refugees that came over, and so we had to do some sort of interpromotional stuff because of course we did. And like I said, the main event in the scene at the time in CWA, if my memory serves me correctly, wasn't that strong. So I just kind of ended up there and just never left.
Fair enough. That's understandable. Why would you leave? So yeah. So other than Carlos, have you got any other favorite feuds or angles that stick out to you from the CWA years?
The Blight feud was fun because there was a whole sort of it was a whole thing is like who's behind the mask, who's the one that's trying to end Cyrus's career. Noah Hansen was also fun because again, anything I do with AON has always got there's always a good amount of give and take whenever I work with AON. But yeah, and what little I got to do with Crash and CWA, because honestly was tragically not that much. I also got to relive a little bit with Dan Maskell, but not a whole lot. Fun fact: Dan Maskell is probably Shade's character is probably Cyrus's oldest rival, and Dan Maskell actually has a winning
Does it
record against
predate
Cyrus.
even CWA or?
Oh yeah, this is like way early.
Okay.
Early
I do
stuff.
remember in some more recent promos some allusions to the history between the two. I think it might have been in the recent CWA rebirth shows, maybe, or maybe in an FWA show. I'm not sure. Talk us through the Dan Maskell rivalry briefly.
Dan Maskell basically represented everything that Cyrus hated about people. It's like Dan Maskell is a sociopath. He is a nihilist. He is the absolute worst of humanity. And the fact that he was able to become the world champion was just, it was unacceptable, in a lot of the other feuds that we were in.
So it harkens back to the idea of not being worthy of being the champion, not being a champion even if you're holding the title.
Correct. Dan Maskell was a brutal masochist and lunatic. And it's never, and fighting him was always something that Cyrus enjoyed, if nothing else, just to knock his teeth out of his mouth, knock his teeth down his throat. But it was oil and water. Is that you got on one side you have a man of principles and another man who just does not care and will do and say the worst things because he can get away with it.
Which is the Maskell character in a nutshell, I guess.
Pretty
you
much.
Mentioned briefly when we were talking about the Chubby Carlos feud, a specific promo that you had written for that match. Wanted to talk a little bit more generally about promo writing, I guess. How do you go about constructing a promo? Do you have much of a plan, or do you just kind of get in there and see kind of how it falls out? Like how would you sit down and start, either back then or now, or?
For me, I have to take whenever I'm up against somebody, I have to take a look and say, okay, first of all, the first step is what history does my character have with this one? Because it is so much easier to write a promo against somebody that you have some history with, that you've either faced before, come across, maybe partnered at one time, because it's so much easier to kind of drag. When you say stuff about that person, it hits heavier because you know that person. If I don't have that history, then it's like, okay, well, let's take a look at the character, what they've done in the past, and what they are. Okay. So let's say I'm facing, like, if Cyrus was to fight, who hasn't Cyrus fought yet?
There aren't many people. I don't think. Maybe one of the newer guys, Trixie.
Okay, so let's say that Cyrus is fighting Trixie. Let's just throw that out there. What do I know about Trixie? Okay, who does she hang out with? What's her personality? Oh, she's this overly excitable sort, and it's like, all right, fine. How do I work that? Well, enthusiasm's great. Blind enthusiasm and are you is a completely different story. And is that really who you are? Or do your actions suggest that there's more to it than that? Are you more of a two-faced sort of individual? And that's like, okay, so that's the angle I can go with this. The one thing I always want to pick out is what is my opponent good at, and more importantly, what is their one flaw? What is that one thing that I can just drill into? And then from there, it's just like, okay, then I just have to figure out what the setting is to write down. Do I go more serious and less ostentatious, like I went with my with my most recent promo against Peacock, or do I go with something a little bit more setting wise? What sort of things have I been watching lately that I've been that I like? Like the Carnal Contendership promo from 20 in the second one I won was because I was on a bit of a Dark Souls kick. Is like, okay, I can work with this. It's like it always starts with who you're facing first, because everything else beyond that is like yeah, the whole point of a promo for me is that, and not just in EFED but in wrestling in general, I need to get to a point where I'm like, why we are fighting? Why do I care about fighting you? And more importantly, why do I want to beat you? And why do I want to prevent you from winning?
I think that's definitely something that you can tell from reading your promos, that is one of the first things that you approach, is that your appraisal of the opponent is always quite like intricate and unique, and maybe not something that you'd have immediately thought about for that character. And it does always seem like you got your finger on the pulse with what's going on with your opponent's characters and how that kind of fits into Cyrus's mentality and his kind of view. It's definitely noticeable. Have you ever done any writing outside of EFEDing? Are you interested in writing in general, or is EFEDing your primary kind of writing outlet?
I mean, it's the most writing I do. I've done a little bit of writing here and there, but nothing serious. I mean, I like writing most of the time. It's just with EFED, it's like, deadlines and whatnot. It's like when I don't have a deadline to work with, it's like I have to force myself in order to do it. It's like, it's more like because if I don't have a deadline and I'm just trying to do it,
I know what you mean.
I get distracted very easily.
Can kind of give you that urgency that you need to get stuff down. I was going to briefly mention your time on you were on the staff as well, right, for the CWA? Is that correct? What are your recollections of that time? What are your favorite and kind of least favorite things about being on the mod team for the CWA?
I mean, my favorite thing was always just kind of taking a look at stock of what kind of characters we're working with and what kind of things we can do. It's like, okay, what kind of interesting stories can we tell with these characters? What kind of interesting feuds can we have? Who does it make sense for this character to be facing for this particular reason or for this particular title? Because coming up with those sorts of angles is fun. It's fun to think about. Okay, well, what can I do that would generate an interest, not just between the two characters, but just for anybody who might be reading this. That being said, match writing was rough towards the end of my tenure there, because it's like, how many different ways can I say this wrestler delivers this particular move, this wrestler counters with this particular move. The thing is that I wasn't bad at match writing, but it wasn't my favorite thing. Sometimes in professional wrestling itself is sometimes the least interesting thing.
I definitely feel you on that, especially the match writing and the repetitiveness of that.
I think unfortunately when I ended up writing the Wrestle Royale, that I think
I'm pretty confident.
I think Michelle.
So I am pretty confident that you wrote it because Conchu appears in it. So I'm certain that you wrote it on that basis. But which I obviously didn't realize until quite recently. I was looking back on that match, probably about a year ago maybe, and I saw that Conchu was in there, and I popped for that, like a little foreshadowing of his FWA run.
But writing that match by myself kind of burned me out, man. It was rough because because it was delayed by like a week or two. It's like, okay, fine. I just had to sit down and actually just get this done, and I did, and it was fine. God,
Well, I don't know about anyone else,
was
but I thoroughly
rough.
enjoyed that much. But there you go. Okay,
Thank
so
you.
moving on then to 2016 then, and specifically to the carnal contendership event, quite outside of Cyrus Truth's sphere as a competitor, obviously a CWA legend already at this stage. But we're in Dublin, Ireland. 15 entrants have already been in the match. Number 16, we get the lights going out, and then we get subconscious entry version. Blares out around the arena, big red lettering in the results thread, reading Cyrus Truth. Huge moment in the FWA. I remember I was around this stage, as I've alluded to before. I had a character in this match as well, Jean-Luc Watkins, commentator extraordinaire. I was aware of Cyrus because I had Michelle obviously in the CWA at the time. Maybe because I was very new at that stage, maybe not quite aware of his huge resume of accomplishments in the CWA. But I remember the reaction to Cyrus's debut in the FWA. What do you remember of the reaction before we talk about everything else? The reaction of Cyrus's inclusion in the carnal contendership back in 2016.
When you say the reaction, are you talking like the reaction of everybody that was in FWA at
Well,
the time?
both,
Or are
I
you talking
guess.
about
I
my
was
own personal
specifically
reaction?
referring to the FWA members, the rest of the FWA members.
I mean, the biggest reaction always, first of all, came from anybody that was in FWA at the time that had spent any time in CWA. Like, those who had a chance to kind of experience my work, because at that time Cyrus had been away from wrestling for quite a while, because we had written him off in CWA as part of some sort of angle where some newcomer that not shade the member, shade the
Yeah,
character,
mystic, right? A
which was only
mystic
just
called
slightly
Shade.
confusing.
I only know this because I
Some sort of
saw it when I was
some sort of
doing the
mass
research for this pod. It
miscreant
was
that
a mystic called Shade. Yeah, sorry, go on.
anyway. So yeah, but that was getting their reactions is like some of them were like, I fucking knew it, and some of them were like, holy shit. It was great. And the whole reason that I just decided to enter, and I sent a PM to Shake. It's like, hey, you guys want Cyrus to show up in your event just for the fun, just for the hell of it? He's like, yeah, sure, that'd be a hell of a pop, and it was. And when people got him, and I had been kind of hanging out on the FWA side for a little while, as far as like making snarky comments as I do, just kind of needling people just because it was fun. And this whole thing was like, oh wow, this big guy showed up, this big name showed up from a different federation, and it's like, this is big sort of moments, like. And I appreciate that that it was written like it was a big moment, because it really was. Because like, this champion from one federation on one side of the fence and on WC ended up on the other.
Then you won, and then you went on to win the whole thing. Just it's a bit of context. The top 7 that year, there was no golden opportunity that year, but the top 7 was 1 Cyrus, 2 Chris Kennedy, 3 Ryan Rondo, 4 Danny Toner, 5 Kaizen, 6 Randy Ramon, 7 Jean-Luc Watkins. So some familiar name there, absolutely. But beating 2 huge names like Kennedy and Rondo on the first night to that number 1 spot. Do you remember much about the promo that you wrote to win that match?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I remember that, because it was. I consider it what it was. It was a return. It was a nice return promo for me. The thing about when you're promoing for like a battle royal, especially like a wrestle royal or a carnal contendership, is that it gets very easy very quickly to just kind of harp on every individual person that's in that. And quite frankly, I find that to be, it's almost a little self-defeating. like it's important to mention those people, especially some of the bigger names, because they're the ones that are likely going to win. But to like try to break down each individual one is just it's a lot, and it can kind of get away from the whole thing. So when you're in a match like that, it's always important to focus more, especially for me because it was a debut. It's like, all right, well, I will mention these people as people that I need to be aware of that could potentially win. But here is how I am going. But here is who I am and why I am going to beat every single one of these people. So that whole sword promo where I am taking up the sword again. I am getting back into the ring. I am going back on another journey to achieve something that nobody had done before because, there was some cross pollination between CWA and FWA, there wasn't one character that had reigned as both world champion in both promotions. And that was like, for Truth, that was like, yeah, that's something. That is a goal. That is an objective. And that would catapult my name to the top of the echelon as like, who is the absolute best. And it's like, that was kind of the basis of that promo was like, I am taking up the sword again. Run in terror because
I read the
God
promo
help you for getting in my
yesterday.
way.
Reread it because I would have read it at the time, but it's been 7 years now. Yeah, 7 years. Which is a while.
Oh
But
God.
yeah, it felt it felt like a Cyrus Truth promo. It definitely felt very much in line with what you'd expect from a Cyrus Truth promo. But the tone of it was like really nice to read looking back at what Cyrus's outlook was back in 2016. I don't know if I'd call it hopeful, but there was like an expectant air about it. I thought it was a really strong promo. And I looked through the rest of the thread, obviously for Carnal contendership, and a lot of good promos, a lot of very good promos. But Truth coming out number one with a promo score of 69 out of 80 at the time. So Truth
Nice.
coming in on his debut, wins the Carnal contendership match. At the time, I believe FWA had just finished a brand split between Fight Night and Crossfire, so there was only Fight Night running at the time, from what I can tell, or at least after Carnal contendership, there are no Crossfire events. But there's still two world champions in place. We've got Stu Sinclair, who's the FWA world heavyweight champion, who used to be on Crossfire, and then we also have Philip A. Jackson, who's the FWA world champion, I believe, at the time on Fight Night. So that a lot of those opening kind of segments in that program were about Truth deciding which of the champions he's going to face off against in back in business. And what are your recollections of Truth's kind of early programs in the FWA, specifically those early shows where he was choosing between Stu and Padge, and had a considerable amount of interactions with Stu, who obviously the longer tenured members will remember from back then.
Sure. So yeah, I mean the whole premise for the build to back in business that year was that we have two world champions, but we don't need two world champions. We need to unify the belts. So Truth was going to face one of them for their title before the winner of that match would face off against the other person who survived that match, and there was a whole tournament and to determine who was going to be facing them. I believe it was Rondo, Kaizen, Kennedy, and I don't remember if there was any. I don't know. Was
Yes,
Toner involved in that?
there was a triple threat between those three to find out who would be added to the tournament. Is what I've got down here. I don't know if Toner.
Oh, I remember. Rondo actually actually surrendered his North American Championship to get involved in that because Brian Rondo just can't quit Truth.
Yeah. From what so before that, back in business, the FWA ran a storyline show with no promos, and Rondo beat Kaizen and Kennedy on that show, but I don't know if that match had promos or if it was just decided that it would be Rondo back in business. I can't remember that.
Yeah, I can't recall.
Yeah.
But anyway, Truth was the biggest thing Truth was trying to decide at that point was like, okay, which one of these people do I fight? Because there are legitimate reasons for me to fight both of them. Podge at the time, he was the new corporate. He was the new corporate. Top heel at the time. He was the guy that Princeton was doing his best to make sure was at the top of the card, because Princeton apparently just can't let things be, because fuck us, I guess. But then, and I guess, and when it comes to Stu, for Cyrus, it was like, if I'm going to do this, I might as well try to. I would want to fight the person that most embodies FWA's excellence, and at that time, it was Stu, because Stu was the guy with five world title reigns to his name. He was the old guard, the person that kind of embodied, what it meant to be a top guy in FWA. And like with CW, and like it was with CWA, it's like Cyrus, for whenever he shows up to a promotion, chaos tends to follow him. And it felt like the most appropriate fight to have. It's like, fighting Stu made sense. Proving myself against this guy who has defined a lot of what the main event scene in FWA had over the years is like, this is the fight. And then from there, getting a chance to unify the two world title belts, that was just something that's kind of fell into Truth's lap. It's like, okay, well, I wasn't expecting this, but sure, since I'm here.
Yeah. In that very first segment with Stu St. Clair on the first fight night following Carnal Contendership, we have Truth getting mega heel reactions from the FWA fans. And Stu St. Clair suggests it's more than just legacy for Truth. It's about more than just legacy, and mumbles about CWA and Jimmy King and a lot of things relating to that, which was a running thread, I think, in a lot of the early feuds, that a lot of opponents would bring up Cyrus's loyalty to CWA or that sort of argument. Is that something that you welcomed then? Is that something that you wanted to be part of Cyrus's story, or was it meant to be kind of like a new, a fresh leaf in FWA, or were you happy to carry over?
As a handler, I didn't mind it. It was perfectly understandable from a storyline standpoint that all of these FWA wrestlers would see Cyrus come in, win one of their biggest events of the year, to main event one of their biggest events of the year for their biggest prize, and it's like, what the hell is this guy doing here? Who is this guy, and why is he running around? Why is he doing this? From an in-character standpoint for Truth, at least initially, it was like, I mean, sure, you can think that. That's not the case. I'm literally just here because it seemed like a good challenge at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of was where a lot of Truth's earlier frustration, once we got through back in business, once we started to dig deeper into, Truth's tenure there, that came to a source of frustration for Cyrus. It's like, why? You guys don't understand why I'm here, or what I'm standing for, or why I have these issues with these sorts of things. But no, from a handler standpoint, I completely understood what they were trying to go with. I understand exactly why they decided to go that route, because it made sense. And I can understand why the FWA crowd would have been kind of against Truth initially, but I think that the hostility was maybe a little bit too high at the time, because at that point, Truth had done literally nothing except just show up and win matches, and that's not really something you could boo a man about, because especially considering the way he did. But I mean, and that's just like a minor foible. It's just one of those things that when you have people writing your matches for the matches and the shows for you, that sometimes they'll do that sort of thing. But yeah, I didn't really have any complaints about it. No.
Yeah. Okay. So Truth doesn't wrestle on that first fight night, but on the second fight night out of Carnal Contendership, we see the Exile, Cyrus Truth and Stu team up to face Philippe Jackson and Jean-Luc Watkins, which Truth and Stu won. Truth choosing St. Clair over Padge. We get Truth defeating Christine Quinn and one of the Garcia brothers. I'm not sure about who those characters are, but one of those. Again, partnering.
Malik Garcia was Michael Garcia's little brother that they had a little tag team with.
I've never heard Michael Garcia, Malik Garcia. I've never heard of any of these names. Maybe I wouldn't.
Oh right.
Maybe I wouldn't.
They were a bunch of jobbers. It's fine.
Okay, all right. I'll have to do more research back further to try and find those guys in the archives. But yeah, so another victory for Truth there. I think around this time as well, it might be before Truth's debut. Do you remember the FWA CWA Super Show that ran around this era?
Where Ryan Rondo where Ryan Rondo became absolutely obsessed with Truth, and Truth basically is like, I don't understand why.
Yeah, and I think there was a time limit draw, I think, on that show.
Yeah, that match went to a time limit draw. That was the FWA CWA Super Show. That was Truth returning for the first time to fight during his sabbatical away from CWA. When the show would actually popped off, it's like, okay, well, I should probably make an appearance because I am Mr. CWA. I was the guy who had held CWA world title gold for longer than anybody at that point. So yeah, it makes sense that I would have to make an appearance. And so when the show was being written, I think I was having some sort of a conversation with Shake or somebody. It's like, okay, well, we could do this and have this sort of confrontation. It makes sense. Top guys from both promotions. And yeah, that's kind of where that led to.
Okay, so this was actually before Truth's Carnal Contendership victory. Okay,
yes.
Okay. And then we get to Back in Business 11 with the aforementioned tournament, which saw in the opening match of Back in Business, we saw the Exile Cyrus Truth defeating Stu the St. Clair to win his first FWA World Championship. In fact, the FWA World Heavyweight Championship, Crossfire's old top prize. So he chooses Stu in the end over Philip A. Jackson, gets the victory there. Rondo defeats Philip Jackson to win the World Championship, and then it's Rondo that unifies the world titles at the end of Back in Business 11. Any recollections of the main event match of the Back in Business 11 event? I remember that. Well, I remember. I read yesterday. It was called Apocalypse. Couple of choice lines from it, which I think encapsulated the promo, was both from Cyrus Truth. Back in Business 11 is the end of FWA as you've known it. This is your company's own personal apocalypse. And later on for FWA, this current era of having found itself after being cast away from its old home is coming to an end as four men fight in one night to determine just what this new era will look like. So this expectancy that we saw in Carnal Contendership is built upon here in Back in Business. The title Apocalypse, obviously quite strong and poignant in what it's suggesting about the landscape of FWA and the old guard. So Recollection Tournament and specifically the promo.
Yeah, so the Apocalypse promo was basically built on this whole premise, is like, we're unifying belts. That is already a huge event. This was not too long after. I mean, I think FWA was on WC for like maybe a year at that point, if that, because PWS had shut down and they needed a new home. And it was like, so storylines have progressed and things have happened, but with Cyrus being injected into the mix, and as I mentioned before, when Cyrus shows up to a promotion, things tend to kind of shake out chaos becomes the new order of the day. That's just something that happens whenever this character of mine shows up for a new federation. Is that whatever established hierarchy you have, we're just gonna go ahead and just throw a bomb into that and see what remains of that. So the idea behind the Apocalypse promo is that each one of us represents a specific facet of the traditional four horsemen of the apocalypse, in who they are, what they do, what they represent. If I remember correctly, I believe Stu was war. Taj was pestilence, and Rondo was famine, and Stu was war because it's Stu St. Clair, because the man lives and breathes conflict. Paj being this corporate appointed heel little bastard was, pestilence, because it was in true size anyway, it was choking what the top championship should represent. And Rondo because he fucking abdicated his North American championship just to have a chance to get into that triple threat match to become the other participant in the world title match against Paj. In true size, it's like, my guy, you are obsessed with me, and I don't understand why. Just accept that you're not as good as I am, and we can all move on with our fucking life. But no. And the truest point is that all four of us could be someone that pushes this company from an era that they were still trying to come out of into what they would be on WC, at least out of above game in WC moving forward, right? So it's like, that was the angle I wanted to go with that. Rondo winning, if I don't remember much about the match with Stu, other than the fact that I won, but I do remember that the Rondo match was written in such a way, at least from my personal interpretation of the match, that Cyrus was getting the better of Rondo for a good portion of that match. Like, there was a good portion of that match where Cyrus was just in control in one way, shape, or form. Not to say that he was burying Rondo by any stretch of the means. Rondo was doing his part. I guess Truth was kind of playing the heel, even though he wasn't really doing anything heelish at that time. But Rondo gutting it out and actually getting the win over Cyrus I like the way that match was written, because it led very well to the subsequent rematch that we had at Red, White, and Bruised.
Was it so you didn't see it as a setback at all after Truth comes in with all this momentum to losing that main event at Back in Business?
If you know anything about my character, it's that for all the accolades that I have, whether it's 5-star attraction or Back in Business, I just lose. That's just something about my character that happens. And I might win one match here or there, but for the most part, yeah, I'm the guy. Let it never be said that Cyrus Truth does not know how to put somebody over at the biggest event of the year. But to answer your question, no. I mean, literally, I had won an FWA World Championship. I held it for like an hour, sure, but I had already accomplished everything that I had set out to do. Anything beyond this was just gravy. And the only thing that and losing that main event, I would have liked to have won it, just because just to see the reaction, like, okay, so not only does he win Carnal Contendership, not only does he win one world title, but he unifies it with the other one. Who the fuck is this guy?
Where did he come from?
What is going on here? But no, yeah, Rondo winning that match, I think was perfectly fine. I obviously I don't really have a problem, win or lose, as long as win or lose, as long as the match write up makes sense for the character. I'm good with. And from just even just above game, it's like, yeah, it makes sense. Rondo would be probably the guy that should be the new undisputed champion. At least until he ran into Truth again. And to Truth's point, again is like, yeah, I mean, sure, you could be the undisputed champion, Rondo, but beating me once doesn't really prove anything.
You say until the next time he ran into Truth, which wasn't very long after Back in Business. Quick look at elsewhere on Back in Business for that year, back in 2016. We had Randy Ramon beating Danny Toner in a street fight. Kennedy extended his streak to 5-0 with a win over Kaizen. Belle Connolly defending the women's title against Denora Redgrave. MVH's FWA debut in a special appearance, and also biggest event match of them all on the pre-show, the Lobster Showdown between Brock Lobster and Cock Lobster, which Brock.
A true clash of the Titans. I can't believe they got pushed. I can't believe they got pushed to the
But
pre-show.
yeah, Brock's promo, which was I believe Cock Lobster Sucks, was definitely a precursor to the Reagan Cole promo at this Back in Business. I think that's what he was referencing actually. But I'm glad that we don't put this sort of low stakes filler on Back in Business anymore, personally. But there you go. Anyway, moving on from Back in Business, the fight night following Back in Business, we have Cyrus Truth defeating Philippe Jackson by count out, and then the week after defeating Mike Parr, whilst Zachary Kazadi, later Weasel Person, debuts, and Toner and Ramon won the tag team title belts on that show as well. We had Cyrus doing commentary on Rondo versus Thomas Jordan that night in the main event, setting up their showdown at Red, White, and Bruised, which we've mentioned before, was where they had their rematch. And then on the go-home show, we had Cyrus and Rondo taking a big L to Jean-Luc Watkins and Junha, one of Kaizen's old characters. So yeah, that was the run into Red, White, and Bruised. The first kind of proper. Well, I guess the Stu St. Clair stuff would qualify as a feud. The second kind of big feud for Cyrus. And yeah, so at Red, White, and Bruised, we have a promo that's still in monologue form, as you might expect from the time period. But branching out somewhat, we have something I found really interesting when I was doing the research. Actually, we have they're called shrouds, and they're communicating the FWA feeling towards Truth at the time. So I thought that this was a direct response to what we spoke about earlier with the murmurs of out of character, branding character murmurs about Cyrus's rival in the CWA. This match was definitely pitched as an FWA versus outsider type deal, even if Truth and Rondo would form some sort of respect, even if not friendship, over this first year of Cyrus's career. The role played.
Now we fucking hate each other. We no, it's I don't want to say it's hate. It's that, you know, the feud between Cyrus and Rondo is one of those feuds. It's like we could pick this up tomorrow and it would still make sense. You know, it's like Cyrus doesn't. Cyrus thinks believes that Rondo is a good wrestler, probably even a great wrestler. He's just not better than him, and that bothers the hell out of Ryan Rondo. At least
Rondo's
from my
someone that you definitely
anyway.
teamed with a lot, even over this first year. So maybe that was just a plot device used, if not something to show gradual respect. Then, but yeah, I thought that this promo definitely leaned into the FWA versus outsider perspective. It was also really inventive, and I thought stood out on amongst the promos at the time. The card, there was a strong monologue in there, which promos kind of had to have back in 2016. But the stuff running through it was a lot more inventive than what you got on almost every other promo on the card, I thought. What was your thoughts on that promo? And you mentioned the feud in general and the relationship with Rondo, but winning the World Championship for the first time, the second World Championship in total for Cyrus at Red, White, and Bruised.
So yeah, I do remember that promo fondly, because yeah, I mean, while from the perspective of the character, this was never about CWA versus FWA. This was Cyrus Truth versus everybody. It was Cyrus Truth just wanting to prove that, you know, the accomplishments and accolades he accumulated in one promotion are not just limited to that particular promotion, and finding a way to voice those concerns, to, you know, be able to answer them in a way that, yeah, you can say this, but what you say and what is actually truth are two completely different things. And and I did really enjoy the work that I did with Shake when it came to any time that Truth and Rondo ever had to face off one-on-one, because Ryan Rondo at the time was like under the impression that I don't have anything to prove to you, Truth. I beat you at Back in Business, Truth. I mean, sure. After we had both had a match, after we had both gotten the shit kicked out of us. Sure, if you think so. But to be fair, Rondo, one, because rematch clauses were still a thing at the time, and two, the only other two people you could have fought that had rematch clauses, I've beaten. So let's put a pin on this once and for all. If you're so good, let's see this. If you could beat me once, you should be able to beat me a second time, right? And it was Cyrus basically daring Rondo to, be a badass for once, put up or shut up. And I had a lot of fun with that because it also allowed me to say to any of the people in the quote unquote, people in FWA that you don't have to like me. You don't have to. You can think that this is some sort of ploy by CWA to make everybody look bad. But on the flip side, if I'm making everybody in FWA look bad, whose fault is that?
For sure. I also liked that we got the Rondo feud after the first kind of proper competitive match at Back in Business, because I remember the FWA CWO Super Show. The arrangement was you could promo if you wanted to, but you didn't have to. Storyline match. So I think the Back in Business one would have been the first proper competitive meeting, even if there were other people in the promo pool as well.
That is correct. And honestly, the FWA CWA Super Show is pretty much kind of the catalyst for Truth coming into FWA in the first place. It's like, okay, I fought somebody from FWA. We went to a time limit draw, but I had fun fighting him. I haven't had fun fighting somebody in a while, so it's like, all right, well, I'll just enter myself in this battle royal and just see what happens from there. Oh, oops, I win.
Yeah, it's good because like stemming from that Super Show all the way through to Red, White, and Bruised, you have this kind of simmering Rondo storyline, the feud that's building, and then it's finally the focus on just those two in the weeks leading up to Red, White, and Bruised. I really enjoyed that that program when I was reading through that over the last few days. And Truth starts his second reign with a world championship in FWA, his first with the FWA World Championship, and that's really what this podcast is mainly going to focus on. I mentioned at the start that this will be the first. Maybe I didn't mention. I think I did the first of a trilogy, in fact, with Truth here in the booth. And
we got a lot of material to cover.
Indeed, yes. First one is gonna mainly focus now for the duration on that first reign with the FWA World Championship. So directly after Red, White, and Bruised, the quest for the best tournament, where the prizes are shot at any singles championship that you're eligible for, because there's a women's championship at the time, so that could have been challenged for by female characters. Truth didn't enter; he was the champion. Would you have liked to have entered that tournament, or is it something that you were glad to have sat out on back in 2016?
6 one way, half a dozen the other, really. I mean, it would have been nice to compete in the tournament, but honestly, because I was the champion at the time, there was no reason for me to do so. If I wasn't the champion, like if I had lost to Rondo, I love you, Shake, but but if I had lost to Rondo, would I have liked to have been in the tournament? Absolutely, because it would have been another challenge for Truth to take on, and that was the whole reason he was there. Is like, I want to be challenged. I want to prove myself and build my legacy. But when you're the world champion, it's like you're not the one who has to prove anything anymore. You're the one that everybody has to prove again. You're the one that everybody has to prove to.
Yeah. So in that quest for the best tournament, there are a couple of kind of, I remember at the time, I don't want to say favorites, but maybe popular favorites where there's kind of a swell of people behind that character. I think there was kind of like a definite Kaizen camp at the time of people wanting Kaizen to kind of get that push up towards the very top of the card. And also similar kind of camp around Belle Connolly at the time, who was also, I think, in the tournament, but I might be wrong on that. I'm sure AOM will correct me, but I'm pretty confident that both of those were in the tournament.
If my memory serves me correctly, I believe that Belle because it was Bell that Truth fought first as his first title defense. And I think that just kind of happened because Bell was still the women's champion at the time, and she basically kind of walked down and just asked for a title shot, if my memory serves me correctly.
So I've got here. Oh yes, you're right. Yes, the first defense was against Bell on the anniversary show, just like MVH's first defense actually was against Bell on the anniversary show. So nice symmetry there between MVH and Cyrus Truth. So there was a short Bell kind of program there leading to the anniversary show, and that's something that carried on for years afterwards. Obviously, eventually Cyrus responsible for Bell's semi-retirement. So those first interactions with Bell, I do remember that Bell had a huge reign with the women's championship already under her belt, and there was a lot of people who wanted her to move across to the world scene, maybe do what Ronda had done with the North American Championship. What were your feelings on that time? Would you have rather have done a more meaty Bell Connolly feud than the Mile High Massacre match that you went on to after the anniversary show?
I mean, in character, Cyrus would have preferred that. We'll get to that when we get to that because that's an important part of the second half of Truth's reign. But as far as again, if we would have gotten a more meaty feud, sure, I guess, but we would have had to work really hard to make that happen. Because as you mentioned, there was not just Bell, but Kaizen was coming back on strong, trying to get back into the world title picture. After he had a reign on Crossfire, if memory serves me correctly, but it wasn't a particularly long one of that. But yeah, I mean, I had fun with the Bell feud. I like working with AON. I don't think AON likes working with me anymore because I'm sorry, AON. I'm very sorry. It was not my intention to just stomp you after the whole Chubby Carlos thing. Wasn't my intention. I am sorry.
Methinks you're protesting too much there. It's it sounds like you're admitting guilt rather than innocence. But
either way, I enjoyed that. And if it was perfectly fine for like a first title defense, because if Bell won, holy shit, new title, new champion, everybody's happy. Truth wins, it's a good strong title defense to kind of lead into the reign, and I honestly, the Ashes promo that I wrote for that particular match, that particular title defense, probably was my favorite of the very early promos that I wrote for FWA. I really enjoyed the work that I did with that one.
Okay. Any particular reason why was that a prominent one for you?
Because that promo, there were some monologue bits to that, as like you've said, prominent at the time, but it was in the premise of actually just telling a story. Like the whole idea behind, everybody thinks that this is going to have a fairy tale ending because Belle at the time was the happy, excitable, manic pixie dream girl before Truth broke her. And to put it into that sort of aspect of, oh yeah, no, fairy tale, the princess rallies the soldiers, ends the war, reigns, and everybody lives happily ever after. No, I'm sorry, sweetie, but that's not how this story ends. Because I refuse to let my story end at the expense of years continuing.
Not on Cyrus's watch, I guess. Not on Cyrus's watch.
Not today.
So we do stick a pin in that Bell feud at the anniversary show after Cyrus defends the Bell success. And then Cyrus loses to Mike Parr on the next fight night. Whilst meanwhile, Kaizen is busy winning the quest for the best tournament, defeating Zachary Kazadi in the final of that tournament. So he will challenge for Truth's title at some undetermined point in the future. Kaizen's also having beef with Bell. They're fighting to a time limit draw on a fight night, followed by Kaizen and Cyrus beating Bell in a tag team match on the next fight night. Which leads us into Mile High, where Cyrus successfully defends, which is quite rare for a world champion, in the Mile High Massacre match. Cyrus Truth defeating Bell Connolly. Eisenstein, James Hughes, and also the prodigy Mike Parr in Mile High 2016. What are your general thoughts on the Mile High match as a concept? Do you feud with 4 people?
So, I mean, when you're having a feud with multiple people, it's always tricky because it's a lot easier to focus on one individual than it is 4 different individuals. So the angle that I decided to go with that, and that's kind of what led to, this morphing of Truth from, face to heel towards the end of that title reign, was the idea is like, whoa, wait a minute. So you're making me defend my title in a match where I could lose my title without actually losing. That's what you're saying. And that's kind of where Cyrus's beef with FWA started. It's like, I have done literally nothing except win matches and present myself as a worthy champion. So you are putting me into this environment where I could lose without losing. And you think that that's acceptable. You think that that's right. And you 4 individuals that are locked in here with me, you think that makes you worthy of this title. I am going to murder all of you because FWA has basically signed your execution order.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned it being multiple opponents. That's a rarity for Cyrus in this reign. I think it's actually his only defense against multiple opponents in the whole of this reign. Lots of well-built singles feuds. So yeah, that definitely was a central element of this program. Cyrus feeling it unjust again, relating back to his idea of what a champion is or what a champion should be, which is central to this first reign and the character in general, I think. But it was a fun variation, I thought, on during the reign. As I say, everything else is one-on-one defenses. I thought the big multi-man match was a fun variation, and I enjoyed the match right up to this when I was looking through. So I wouldn't say it was a highlight of the first reign, but I think it was necessary variation in the middle of it.
I think it was the match itself. The match itself may not have been the most important one of that, but it did plant the seeds for Truth moving forward. It's like, all right, I survived this. I played by your game. Now we're gonna do things. Wait, the fuck? What the fuck is a trial by fire match?
Yeah, that was in the very next pay-per-view, actually. So on the next fight night, Cyrus Truth takes on this guy again. Teams with this guy, Michael Garcia, popping up a lot here, defeating Kaizen and Mike Parr in a tag match. We are definitely.
I have to do it. So now I also have to carry jobbers. What the fuck is this shit?
Story of your life. Story of Cyrus's life. This really explains why he's got such a negative opinion on tag team wrestling, I think.
It all started here.
It all started here.
It all went downhill from here.
So we're definitely building towards this Kaizen defense now that Kaizen has earned the quest for the best tournament, with Cyrus then going on to defeat the jobber Michael Garcia on the next fight night. Then a 6-man match between Cyrus, Parr, and Kazadi, where they defeat Garcia, Kaizen, and Junha in the go-home fight night. Again, another one-on-one feud here. I thought this was a quality feud between Cyrus and Kaizen. Probably my favorite feud of this this whole range. Sorry, I think Kaizen as a character definitely presented very differently from anybody else in FWA at the time, both in his promos and on the show. And yeah, we have the trial by fire match at the 2017 pay-per-view where Kaizen also goes down to Cyrus Truth.
Not exactly.
No, okay.
That match ended in a draw because we both caught on fire at the same time.
Right. Okay. So this show is actually unfortunately absent from the archives. I'm not sure why. So I know that Truth still had the belt on the next show.
Yeah, it was a draw.
Okay. So Kaizen still, I think, occasionally drops in on the FWA to have a read of a few things, but obviously not around as an active handler anymore. Which is a shame. Thoughts about working with Kaizen back in the early stages of 2017 on this program?
I enjoyed Kaizen as a foil. because he was a very talented writer, and he was definitely pushing. And I knew that I had to break out something special in order to make sure that I was going to retain my title. And if I lost, it made sense. It was a good. It would have been a decent run. I got a couple title defenses in, and Kaizen would have done well with the belt. And this was, and I enjoyed this feud because it allowed me to actually play heel for once. At least from an outsider's perspective looking in, because in Truth's mind is like, no, I'm right. I am absolutely 100% right. Why do you think? Why are you booing me? I don't understand. This is not how we're supposed to conduct ourselves as champion. First, you throw me a Mile High Massacre in a cage with a ladder and tell me I have to go grab my title before some other jackass grabs it. And now you're telling me I have to fight somebody and the objective is to not burn. That is what the actual fuck, FWA. And I enjoyed that feud and working with Kaizen because Kaizen was playing the role of, he was the champion of FWA and all, but with all the accoutrements without the belt. And that moment, that conversation we had on the Go Home show where Truth was facing Kaizen's like, listen, man, this is not how we're supposed to do this. You can change this. If you work with me on this, we can actually have a proper fucking match for this belt. And Kaizen's like, nope, trial by fire is a tradition, and we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it like this, and you can't be scared. It's like, okay, all right. I tried diplomacy. Now everybody dies. Now everybody dies. And that promo that I made for that match was another one of my favorites because it allowed me to just kind of just let it all out with the vim and vitriol against against FWA in general. It's like, I tried to do this right. And you assholes didn't even have the common decency to talk to me. It's like, we need you to do this. We understand that you don't want to do this, but we're going to have you do it anyway because fuck you. It's like, all right, fine. I was perfectly happy trying to be the hero of the story, but since you don't want me to be, and you never wanted me to be, that's been the whole kind of overarching story from Truth coming into this, is like that whole outsider thing. It's like, you made this. You made me into the tyrant that I am going to be for the remainder of my reign, and I am going to stack your heroes on top of one another like their corpses until the bodies reach the sky. Have fun with that.
Yeah, and this kind of sort of new mentality of Cyrus, sort of like playing into the role that he's been given, is something that crops up again in a couple of months' time, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on that when we get to it. I don't know if you already have an inkling of what I'm talking about, but before we get to that, following the first Kaizen defense at Trial by Fire, the draw. We have the 2016 awards where Cyrus wins Superstar of the Year and Moment of the Year for his Carnal Contendership debut. And then that Kaizen feud rolls into the next shows. Cyrus triumphs over Tristan James Galloway, but then isn't booked on the Winter Wasteland Super Show, where instead has a heated segment with Kaizen. Rematch terms are agreed. We see Truth and Tommy Thunder defeat Kaizen and Tristan James Galloway on the Go Home show. And Cyrus is taken out by a belt shot from Kaizen to close that show. Culminates in a 30-man Iron Man match between Cyrus and Kaizen. Cyrus in full righteous indignation mode, as you mentioned previously in the promo for that match. And this is a really phenomenal match write-up. It was definitely my favourite match write-up of this reign. If anyone gets a chance after listening to this, go back and read the Payback 2017 main event. 30-man Iron Man match. If you are going to read that, maybe pause and go and do it. About to spoil it. But Cyrus retaining the championship by a score of 3-2. Kaizen going 3-1 down, trying to bring it back as the time elapses, but unable to do so. Cyrus emerges the champion. So this was the only 2 pay-per-view feud, I think, in the Cyrus reign. Do you recall that 30-minute Iron Man match? Sorry, from Payback.
I thoroughly enjoyed that match right up. The only downside of that is I believe Kaizen no-showed for that event, so I kind of fault. But I thoroughly enjoyed that match right up. I think it was played very well for both characters. Truth dominating in the early parts, and then having Kaizen try to claw back just to be just that far away from actually being able to tie it up and forcing it into an overtime. I thought the match also worked very well for Truth because it was the kind of match that he literally wanted. This is the kind of match he wanted. It was the one-on-one, no bullshit, no stupid fucking gimmicks, no fucking fire. Let's just beat the shit out of each other one-on-one until we decide who's the best. And if nothing else, I appreciate that feud with Kaizen for what it was. Again, Kaizen, exceedingly talented writer. We had some very good, strong segments leading into that. But I do appreciate that because that was kind of because the end of that match where Truth retained, I was able to use that as more fuel for the upcoming feud as we were proceeding forward into back of business 2017.
Because the next show following Payback 2017 is the Carnal Contendership, and this, in fact, back in 2017 was a 1-match card. Just the Carnal Contendership took place on this event. Cyrus going into the event as champion, so unbooked on the single match card. And we have Shannon O'Neill winning Carnal Contendership 2017 TGO's character. And that event ends with Shannon tackling Truth off the stage and through a table, setting the tone for their rivalry going into Back in Business 12. So on the next fight night, the main event sees Truth and Rondo teaming up again for I think the 3rd time in Rondo's career to face Bell and Shannon.
Always got to keep carrying
always. So I'm not around at this point. I disappeared at the Quest for the Best tournament. That's when I sort of left. So all of this is new to me from the Kaizen feud onwards. And there's this was very interesting to read at the end of the mid-May 2017 fight night. We have a lead pipe attack on Shannon O'Neill, which obviously a lead pipe is a weapon that's used quite often in FWA. It's a common trope within the Federation. Shannon is found bloodied by an unknown attacker at the time, which I believe turns out to be Cyrus Truth in the next couple of shows, which did seem somewhat out of character to me, I think, for Cyrus. But it does lean in a little bit to what you were saying before about Cyrus sort of accepting the role that he'd been given by everyone around him since he came into the FWA. Do you remember that angle? Is there anything that you remember about that angle?
The Shannon feud was probably my personal favorite of that first reign. I enjoyed that tremendously because up until Shannon won Carnal Contendership that year, she had been very vocal about, feeling that Truth wasn't doing enough, that he wasn't inspiring people enough, that she was running her mouth basically. And to her, from a certain perspective, you could agree that she might have a point there. From Cyrus's point of view, it's like, who the absolute fuck are you to tell me? And then that whole instance where she wins the match, wins Carnal Contendership, drives Truth off and off the stage, to really put some fucking heat on that. The Golden One is a phenomenal writer. I know he has his favorite characters, but but just from the interactions that I have had and the work that I've done, I enjoyed his work with Shannon tremendously, and we did some major business. Regarding that attack, nobody had me sign off on that attack. They just kind of wrote that on the show. It's like,
I wondered if that
wait
was
a minute,
maybe the case.
no.
But yeah, sorry, go on.
But fortunately, if nothing else, I am very good at
Yeah.
making chicken salad out of chicken shit. So, the idea was like, okay, how do I fix this? So my next promo, which I believe I was facing Paj again after he had one of his one of his several dozen
Yes.
face or heel turns at that time.
June
he was the
2nd,
face at that
Truth
time.
defeats Paj in a non-title match. Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Right. Yeah. In my promo for that, I decided to address it as like, yeah, I did it. Why did I do it? Because I have to. Because Shannon needs to understand that this is what happens when you're chasing the glory that is being the world champion. That people are going to come for your head, and to be completely honest with you, Shannon, if I wanted to make sure that you didn't make it to back in business, we would not be having this conversation. You would be gone, and I would have no opponent. So I enjoyed the challenge of like taking this moment as like, this is not something that Truth would really do. He wouldn't hide the fact that he beat the shit out of somebody. So it's like, okay, then I won't hide it, and I will explain my actions and why I did it, and why this is important. This was important for me to do in order to make sure that Shannon understands just what happens when you fuck around with Truth.
Yeah, that's definitely the impression I got when I was reading it. The first segment definitely seemed very out of character, maybe for Cyrus, and then the motives of it became a bit clearer with the next couple of segments after the Truth defeating Jackson match that you mentioned. We have Shannon coming out with the pipe to confront Truth, and a lengthy segment between them setting up their main event showdown.
That segment on the Go Home show, however, that was good.
Yes, we have
right
that's
there.
June 23rd. Cyrus defeats Bell as part of a double main event, which also had Rondo versus O'Neal. Off-screen stuff occurs with Cyrus in the promo here. More allusions to the World of Shadow, which I thought was very good. But yeah, so we have the main event Go Home segment. Yeah, do you want to talk us through that?
So because it was basically the Truth putting all of his frustration out on the table. It's like, I am trying my best here to be a champion worthy of the title and to make the title worth something again. Because up until Truth had won the title, the lengthiest reigns that had been associated with that title were Gabrielle and were Paj, and both of them were absolutely, from an in character standpoint, they were absolutely horrible people. Gabrielle had executive excellence backing her up with Thomas Princeton, and was basically in character doing all these horrible things in order to make sure that she kept her grip on the title. And Paj was doing much of the same. This was the legacy of your greatest title, your biggest prize, and I am trying my best to try to fix that. And I can't do that if FWA wants to make me jump through hoops like some sort of circus monkey. And it's frustrating to me that it seems like you think I have to play ball when it's not the company that makes the title. It is the wrestlers that make the title, and without us, this whole thing doesn't happen. And so therefore it's my right to have a say. And Shannon's like, yeah, but this company is also giving you the platform to do this. You have to approach it with some sort of gratitude, Truth. You have to understand that there are some things in this company that are sacred or at least very important enough to us, and you just coming in and thinking that you get to have a say in that is not necessarily the case. And towards the end of that promo, that segment, it's Truth coming to sort of mad realizations like, at the very least, Shannon, at the very least, you are giving me something. This sort of feeling that I am actually going to get a worthwhile fight that I'm actually going to feel something again other than just this abject hatred towards this company that has, in my mind, done nothing but fuck me over since I got here. And I want to see if you actually, and again, it comes back to that whole thing, is that Truth is, by his nature, an exceedingly selfish individual. He wants the accolades, he wants the glory, but there's always been that sort of subtext to that. It's like, yeah, I want the glory, but my glory doesn't mean anything if the people I'm beating aren't rising. You know, I want to make everybody around me better, so that when I when I do triumph over them, that it means something.
Yeah, that's, well, both of those things I think are things that run through this first reign. Firstly, the sort of simmering, disdain eventually for FWA and you know what his run, well, not what his run has become, but the as you say, the hoops that he's been forced to run jump through on his way there. And also, I definitely got a sense, like when I was reading through it, like defense after defense, mostly different people, almost entirely one-on-ones. It had a real like Kenta Kobashi GHC heavyweight championship reign like vibe to it almost, and how you just put it there. He wants everybody else sort of. That's sort of kind of like the impression that I got when I was reading through the match write-ups for the one-on-ones. Definitely.
Yeah. For Truth, it's like I put myself on a very high level, knowing full well that it is very easy to knock me off of it. But if you're going to knock me off of it, you best get on this level, because if you don't, as Truth said in the end of that segment with Shannon, I will eat you alive and suck the marrow from your bones.
Well, that's very forceful. We got some more forceful Truth, but also sort of highlighted by a more vulnerable Truth almost in the Back in Business 12 promo. I thought Reflection and the Meaning of Truth was the title of this promo, with Cyrus fighting some inner demons. Almost incredibly, as I was reading this, there was some comparisons I thought between this promo and the Chris Peacock one for the most recent Back in Business. We have Cyrus, correct me if I'm wrong with the interpretation of this here, but he's fighting some inner demons representing different facets of himself: hate, sorrow, fear, avarice. I might not be saying that word correctly. He's doing
Nope, you
he's
are.
doing this in a hall of mirrors. Sort of confronted by these images of himself representing these facets, much like Peacock's promo sort of was doing this most recent Back in Business in the penultimate sequence. I thought, also accompanied by a huge weighty monologue, finishing with I've got in my notes here, ruminations on what it is to be a champion, something that's always been central to the Cyrus character and his wrestling mindset, which is what we've discussed quite a few times throughout this. Recollections of the promo itself then, from Back in Business 12.
So after the Iron Man match that I had with Kaizen, the promo that I had written after the first promo that I wrote after that, I distinctly recall that Truth had, he was at the end of that match, he was feeling great. He was getting exactly what he wanted. He wanted a challenge. He wanted to prove that he could go the distance. He got everything he wanted, and at the end of the match, he through an exceeding amount of effort and a good amount of intelligence, he was able to win, right? And what happens when he gets his hand raised? Everybody fucking boos him, because he's the villain of this story. And that sort of shit weighed very heavily on Cyrus. And then that promo was basically, the Back of Business promo against Shannon was basically Truth coming to the realization that I don't like what this company has forced me to become. I don't like the role that this company has basically said, this is what you're playing because you don't belong here. And all of those ugly emotions that have been brewing in Cyrus, that he has had time and time again had to fight back, because he understands that it's so if anything, wrestling, not just FWA, but wrestling has proven that it's so very easy to just give in to those darker emotions, to abandon your principles in the pursuit of gold and glory. And the whole point of that promo is that, Shannon, you think I don't know the ugly side of who I am, what I could become if I didn't have these principles that I have preached for the last 7 years? I understand that. I am well aware of that, and I will continue to face them because this is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't understand that, if you can't wrap your head around that, then you are going to get hurt. You are going to get battered, and I am going to run through you.
So, Cyrus versus Shannon, main events back in business 12, the first of 3 consecutive back in business main events for Cyrus. But we have Shannon O'Neill victorious at 34 minutes. This historic reign at 321 days, becoming only the third person after Kennedy and Gabrielle 300 days. What were your thoughts upon losing the championship? In kayfabe, in terms of, do you think it would have been the right time for Cyrus to lose the belt, and also out of kayfabe, considering the pros? What were your thoughts on the loss?
Like I said, TGO is exceedingly talented, so I knew full well that it was a very real possibility that I was losing. And I was perfectly fine with it, because because Shannon has always been that person that has always been trying to reach into the upper echelon, to be that next female wrestler to achieve something that only a handful of female wrestlers have done in FWA at the time. And she had done a lot of talk. And if there was going to be a moment, just from a storytelling standpoint, for Shannon to finally cross the hump, it would be against somebody who had become a miserable bastard with the title. And that sort of dichotomy between the two characters, and that finish for that match, where Cyrus just couldn't actually, something that we kind of repeated for another back in business, which we'll talk about, but that sort of a moment where Cyrus just couldn't get up anymore in that last bicycle kick, that was actually my suggestion for the finish of that match, just to kind of put a nice exclamation point, because winning or losing for me, for the most part, I could care less about. As long as you treat the wins and losses with respect, that's all I've ever asked for. And I wanted, and if this was going to be a big event, this is going to be the end of a tyrant's reign, the end of the reign of the despot that just came in as the outsider and became the villain everybody expected him to be. It was a good match. The promos for both of them, again, all the credit in the world to TGO for winning that match. No problems here whatsoever. And just that finish was a very good exclamation point. And things kind of ended up different than I expected after that, after back in business. And I was the amount of coordination I had with TGO on that feud was probably some of the highest that I've had in this fed. And it showed where it was a very interesting progression that went in a direction I wasn't really expecting, but ended up being great and kind of helped Truth on to the next leg of his particular journey.
That's a very good feeder and a delicate tickle ahead of if we're going to see that shoot off in another direction. But looking back over the I'm unsure whether to call it the first or second reign with all world titles, but the first with this specific world championship. Looking back over it, 321 days, obviously had to do a lot of different things, which Cyrus absolutely did. Obviously won the belt after a feud with Rondo. having already feuded with Stu. And then against Bell, he defends in the Mile High, and then following that he Kaizen twice, defends against Shannon O'Neill at Back in Business. I might have missed a defense there, but is there anything else that you would have liked to have done during the first reign with the FWA World Championship? Any defenses that didn't happen? Any people from back then who you'd have liked to have defended against during that run that didn't work out for whatever reason?
It's hard to say if there were any defenses that I wouldn't have minded having during that, because I think that the reign itself was I was very happy with the story that we told during that reign, because I'm sure you can. I'm sure you know better than most that sometimes it's hard to have kind of long term, storytelling with a particular reign, because just the nature of how this Fed works is that you have a champion, but there's always a possibility that they can have this sort of long, lengthy reign, but there's like 5 or 6 people on any given day that can just end that reign with a killer promo, and it's. Because I am just exceedingly grateful that I was able to have this kind of lengthy reign and had the opportunity to face off against the people I did, because it allowed me to tell a story that I hadn't really told with Truth before. Because again, Truth has never really played heel, and at this point it's probably not going to really happen again, because at this point there's not really a story to be told with Truth as a heel, but in that instance there was. And while we could have told it without the world title, there would have been something missing from that. And I'm very grateful that just the nature of the time, and that my work was on a level where I could maintain my grip on that title all the way up until practically mostly between both Back in Businesses, have that lengthy of a reign. And the people that I was fighting, that I defended the title against, the Mile High match, a little bit disconjointed, but the match itself served to tell the story as well. And there were plenty of stories to be told like that, like my on again, off again feud with Mike Parr, where we just trade wins every 5 months or so. But yeah, facing Bell, facing Kaizen, getting that awesome kind of capstone with Shannon O'Neill that we ended up playing to a little bit more after the bet. I can't really say enough about how much I enjoyed that reign, and it's probably the best work that I've ever really done in a championship position, at least with EFED. So
yeah,
I think have no complaints.
I think like an iconic world championship reign in the FWA is something that very, very few people have done, like an iconic lengthy reign, like over 300 days. I've already mentioned the only people who've done it is Kennedy, Gabrielle, Cyrus, and I think now Sullivan as well. So like.
Oh, Sullivan, Sullivan's at like 400 days.
I don't know if that's combined or a single reign, but I think he did have one very lengthy single reign, didn't he? But yeah, so like you think about iconic lengthy reigns.
Yeah, and then he fumbled, and then Sullivan fumbled.
Yeah, so somebody who
a random jobber.
keeps popping up in this podcast. We'll have to come up with a code word for parts 2 and part 3. But yeah, so yeah, that's the first reign. Well, the second reign, I should say. Sorry, but the 327 day behemoth of a reign, capping off Cyrus's just over first year in the FWA. And I think, unless you have anything to add on that first reign, that might be a good opportunity for us to close off on episode 1. Final thoughts on reign number 2 or reign number 1, which was less than 3 hours, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first title was just a title win. It wasn't really a reign. But the first actual reign itself, yeah, I like I said, I'm glad that I was able to. It's always blown my mind that I'm able to have done this with this character for this long, and that sort of lengthy reign was just kind of validation. He's like, you know
Mhm.
what? I'm not actually bad at this. Huh. That's neat. Huh. But yeah, no, I had a lot of fun with that reign. I had a lot of fun with exploring the sort of twist with truth. It's like I am right, but you all still don't like me, and you still
Mhm.
disrespect me anyway. That sort of angle, and it's it was a rocky relationship with Truth and FWA to begin with in character, but I can't say enough about the reign itself. I thought it was great, but I thought it was great. I thought it told a very good story. I I had a lot of fun exploring this and that, and the way it ended the way it ended is the way it should have ended. It back in business with me, giving
Yeah.
giving a new world
Yeah, I
champion the
love this
rub.
reign. I loved reading back over this reign. I was quite envious actually of how almost epic this reign is. Almost a whole year with a lot of really killer defenses. But there's more of that to come because I mentioned that Cyrus became the first man with a reign. The third man with a reign of over 300 days. And in episode 2, we'll get to hear about reigns number 3 and number 4, including when he becomes the first man to do that twice with the same belt. And then episode 3 will take us into more modern times, and maybe amongst this 5 to 6 hour of discussion, we might have chance to talk a little bit about Khonshu as well. But we'll see if we have time amongst Cyrus's considerable body of work. But for now, we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. But for me, Supine Snake, it's good night, and for Cyrus, good night also, and we'll catch you in a couple of weeks for episode 2 of this exciting trilogy. Thank you.
Later, dorks.